everyone. I'm Nadia and I'm back for another episode of the Fasting Method podcast. Today, my amazing co-host is away on a much-deserved break. So Megan Ramos is not here with me today, but I am joined by an extra special guest who was with us for episode 29. Some of you might recall Wende talking to us about her diabetes reversal. And the episode was so amazing. She was so inspiring. And so many of you were left wanting a little bit more. And so were we. So Wende has so generously agreed to come back today. First of all, I wanted to say hello. Hi, Wende. How are you?
Hi, Nadia. Thanks for having me.
Well, absolutely my pleasure. So today we are going to record a hot topic, and today's hot topic is on neuropathy. So before we hear a little bit more about Wende's amazing journey, I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about this topic of neuropathy. So some of you, unfortunately, know this a little too well, way too much, unfortunately. Neuropathy is a condition that develops when there is damage to your peripheral nerves, and this can cause symptoms such as weakness, severe pain, numbness, tingling, usually of the hands and feet. The major cause for neuropathy is actually diabetes. And again, very common, and many of you know. And Wende, although she seems like an alien, I often joke, she is a human. And unfortunately, 40 years of diabetes did take a toll on Wende's body. Now, there's a lot of really amazing celebrations to Wende's journey and story, and we will talk about that as well. But unfortunately, Wende too, like I said, even though she may seem like an alien because of how amazing she is and how strong she is, at times we've called her superhuman, but she is nonetheless a human. And so she has generously agreed to share her story of neuropathy with us. So tell us a little bit more, Wende. For those that listened to episode 29, they got to hear your amazing journey recovery, and you briefly mentioned your very recent surgery that you had, but there's a lot of background to this, right? About neuropathy and your experience with neuropathy and the sort of consequences of that. Again, with some silver lining, with some celebrations along the way. So let's hear a lot more from you, Wende.
Thank you, Nadia. Yeah, it was about 10 years after I had diabetes. I went to my primary care doctor and I said, I don't know what's going on. My pinky finger falls asleep. And it's like, I don't have feeling in it. And my feet tingle. It's like falling asleep. I don't know how else to describe the feeling, but I know that I don't have the normal feeling that I once did. So she said, I'm going to send you to a neurologist and we'll figure out what this is. I said, okay. And I waited and I went to this neurologist. I looked up what a neurologist was. I didn't even know what a neurologist was. He was very nice, very friendly, very gentle. And he just talked to me and he said, tell me, why are you here? And I said, well, I've had diabetes for 20 years now. And my pinkies on both hands are falling asleep, like they're numb. They get tingly and sometimes a jabbing pain. And I noticed when I rode my bike, my feet would do the same thing. And my first step, always off the bike, wasn't right. So I just said to him, I said, we need to find out what this is. And he said, oh, we will. He said, what I'm going to do is run a test on both your hands and your feet and your legs. He says, I have this machine here, and I called it the Frankenstein machine because it did make me a little nervous. And he took his probes. I remember he had these probes, And he put little round stuff on my legs and my feet. We started with that. And he took the probe, and Nadia felt like he was jabbing my muscles. There was like really strong impulses. And I mean, it hurt. And I was like, whoa, you have the electric too high? That's what it felt like. It felt like he was giving me some kind of electric shock. So about a half an hour for one side, between my left side, my feet, my legs, and my hands and my arms. And then another half hour on the right side.
Wow, that does not sound like fun at all, Wende, to say the least. And that's what, unfortunately, most people with diabetes that have this consequence have to go through, even just to get diagnosed, right?
Yep. So another half hour goes by. He knew right away. I mean, this doctor was an old-time doctor. And he said to me, we'll try some medicine, but you have neuropathy. And it's common with people with diabetes. When your blood sugars are out of control, it does damage. And that's what neuropathy does. So he says, you have neuropathy in your hands to your elbows, both hands, both elbows. He said, your feet, the neuropathy is worse in the left foot to your knee. He said the right foot shows some neuropathy, but it's not as bad. He said, when you walk, what foot do you lead off on? And I said, I'm left-handed, but I start walking with my right foot. He said, exactly. So this man knew. He was an expert in his field. I don't remember the medicine that we tried. It might have helped a little bit, but I would cut myself or burn myself cooking and not even realize that I burnt myself until I looked down. This is a very serious situation.
It's a very serious and debilitating concern and consequence of diabetes. And I think you're right, especially such an experienced doctor like yours. He was very aware of this condition because unfortunately, so many of his patients with diabetes would, of course, have this. And so many of the people listening in to us today, I just want to make sure that I know you are for sure, Wende, but I just want to make sure that we're very aware and really considerate of the people listening in. This is not a subject that we're taking lightly. We're not talking about this lightly. I mean, Wende herself has been dealing with this for, I guess, decades now, over 10 years, you said, right, Wende?
Yeah, 10 years. I had diabetes for 20 years at that point. And so when it was diagnosed, I had 20 years of my blood sugar.
Yeah, it's been over 20 years of this. So many people listening in. This is the kind of things that they're dealing with. And I mean, we could obviously have a hot topic once a week. Every week could be a hot topic on all the dire consequences of diabetes. So tell us what you've experienced as a consequence of this.
Well, what happened was several years later, I went for treatment. I went back for more tests, and I was hoping there would be improvement. There wasn't. It was getting worse. And what happened in we'll just say 2000, I went back to him and he said, you can't work anymore. You're going to start falling down. And I said, what? He said, you're going to start falling. You need to take things slow. It's time for you to retire and move on.
Is that because you were losing so much of the sensation, Wende, that you were going to start and he was worried that you were going to start falling and create serious injuries?
Yes.
Okay. And then what happened?
He was worried about the motor skills. And I just said, well, I'm going to start exercising. I'm going to start I had a piece of equipment that I used. It was like a glider that I would stand on and do that for an hour. I was going to try and reverse the neuropathy. I didn't know about it. I went to the library. Internet now is available, so I learned about neuropathy. I'd like to jump now to 2021, if I can. My diabetes, my A1C was very high. And because of that, the neuropathy, of course, got worse too. And what happened was all the bones in my left foot, my arch, collapsed. And it was very painful. And I had fallen. And he was right. The neurologist was right. I didn't just fall.
Unfortunately, he was right, and it happened to you. And it wasn't a light fall. Tell us a little bit about that story. I've heard a little bit about this story, but I know it was, nobody wants to fall. And the consequences of falling, especially as your health becomes more debilitated, can be quite severe. And yours was no easy and with a lot of consequences to follow as well. But you fell, was it in an airplane or an airport?
It was getting off an airplane. And I took my first step, expected to feel the ground, and I didn't. It was like I lifted my leg up too high and not feeling the ground. And I stumbled and I flew down the ramp.
Wow.
And all I could think about was, you're going to hurt. You need to try and relax. It'll be over in a second. Let's see what happens. All the airline personnel came running to me and picked me up and threw me in a wheelchair and ran me up the ramp to the ticket agent. And from there, things just got worse.
I'm going to want more details. So things got worse as in what? What happened to you? And you're telling us that this was all a consequence basically of the neuropathy and then all the damage that diabetes had already done to even your bones.
Yeah. The fall, I didn't know at the time what damage was done. I was visiting a cousin. I wasn't home. I was in Florida. And that night, I took my shoe off and my sock, and my foot was huge, black and blue, throbbing. I did feel the throbbing, and I'm like, whoa, I need to get ice on my foot right away. My cousin wanted me to go to the emergency room, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to deal with this when I got home, and I live in Arizona. Mm-hmm. So for the week that I spent, I stayed in the swimming pool and off my foot as much as possible. I used crutches. So I knew I wasn't doing any further damage, but I didn't know what damage was done yet.
Well, thank goodness for that. So when you finally got home, what did you find out?
I had gone to a foot doctor and they took x-rays, and immediately they saw multiple fractures and a dislocation of my foot.
A lot of people don't know this, Wende, but unfortunately diabetes, especially very poorly controlled diabetes, like in patients with type 1 or patients that take insulin, type 2 diabetics that take insulin. Many people don't know this, but diabetes can lead to very poor bone quality and increased very high elevated risk of fractures. Diabetes is often talked about as being, a very high incidence of diabetes and obesity in North America and all over the world. But I wonder how many people actually know that they're at not just a high risk for neuropathy and blindness and all of these terrible things that have happened to you. So not only are you more prone to falling because of the neuropathy, but you're a lot more prone to fractures. And really having poor bone quality. And I know at this point, this is all sounding very doom and gloom, right, Wende? Because this is just what a journey, what an experience you've had. And so many of people listening, I know, our listeners and friends, unfortunately, are dealing with some of this stuff themselves. But this story does get better, and you are a ray of sunshine, Wende. You are just hope in one person. So I know that we're going to talk a little bit more about your just the journey that you've had and about how much you've actually overcome. So not all of it is going to be positive, but there's some amazing things that you're going to share with us before we go today. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that you're here, you've asked to be here, or we've asked you and you've agreed to be here because you want to share hope with people. So please continue. So then you had the x-ray and they found all these fractures, but then what happened? I know you had to wait many years to have this treated, but tell us about your A1C and then what happened.
My A1C was 15, and it was totally out of control. And they wouldn't do any surgery. They put me in a cast. And every week I'd have a different cast. And every week they'd do more x-rays. I went through 3 foot doctors. I went through an orthopedic surgeon. And each of them, we had to start over from point A. I'm in point H. Well, we had to start over. But in the meantime, I took my A1C very serious. I knew I was in danger. I knew that if I didn't make changes, I wouldn't be around. So my goal was to lower my A1C, and it went from 15 to 9. And I'm rushing through this because we talked about this in the first podcast.
Yes, we did.
It's now, I'm at my foot doctor's office, and I say, look, I've lost all. I need help. I know you don't take care of charcot. I've been diagnosed with charcot in my left foot. Look at my arch. My arch has collapsed. All the bones are crumbling in my foot. My foot doctor says, I know who can help you. I went to school with his wife, and I've gotten his approval, Nadia, to mention him by name because he is my hero. His name is Dr. Jeffrey McAllister, and he's part of the Foot Ankle Institute of Arizona. I went and saw Dr. McAllister, and he took x-rays. He saw x-rays from my foot doctor and other doctors because I'm on a portal. It's a shared portal. And it's quite frequent that all doctors can see. You have to give your approval, and I did. But he saw pictures that I took since day one of this injury. And he said, we need to talk about the elephant in the room. You need reconstructive surgery, and I'm your guy. I said, okay, thank you. He says, but we need to talk. We need to talk about the elephant. We need to talk about what might happen. Said, okay. I knew what was coming, but okay. He said, Wende, if for whatever reason your body or I can't reconstruct your foot or your body doesn't accept this surgery or you get an infection, I may have to amputate your leg below your knee. And that brought back all kinds of memories with my aunt being a type 1 diabetic. And so I shook my head. I couldn't even talk to him. I just shook my head, yes, controlled my emotions, and then said to him, when can we do this? He says, what's your A1C? And I said, my A1C is 7, thanks to TFM. He's like, what's TFM? I said, the fasting method. You ever hear of Dr. Jason Fung? No.
You're pretty amazing, Wende. you're getting emotional and I'm getting emotional. This reminds me of the first day that we met. And when you came into our Zoom meeting, we talked about it in the last episode that we were together, but it's almost impossible to not get this emotional when talking about a topic like this. And I really appreciate, I know you have very fond memories of your family members that have suffered with diabetes and have unfortunately had to get amputated. And again, I know how sensitive this topic is, and so many people listening in might be struggling and dealing with similar things right now. And you had to be faced with this very challenging, scary decision, which was you had to have this very serious surgery to fix your foot. But being a diabetic, or at least previously having been a diabetic and causing that much harm, of course, the diabetes having caused that much harm to your bones, to your health, creating the neuropathy that originated all of this, and then having to decide to do the surgery that you needed for the quality of your life, but then, running the risk of having to possibly, and it's hard to even say this, possibly having to be amputated, right? But that was a real risk, and the diabetics know only too well. So the fact that you found your own, I know you are so great at celebrating TFM, the fasting method in our community, but really you're the amazing one that's put all of this into practice, and you have done such a great job bringing your A1C down from 15 to 9 and then to 7 so that you could do the surgery and just really blow everyone away with what came out of this. Still, that journey wasn't easy, was it? Tell us a little bit about that surgery and post-surgery.
Yeah, it wasn't. Well, I got a call from Dr. McAllister, and he said, Wende, yeah, COVID, I'm going to try and protect you as much as I can. There's an opening. I want you to go to this surgical facility. It's about 50 miles away from where I live. I said, okay. I knew about this facility because 5 years before me, my brother had the same surgery. So I knew of the facility. I just jumped at the opportunity. I said, yes, I'm there. I'm there right now. I'll be there. Yes. And he said, okay. So the surgery was done. I was released from that facility, and the first blood work that was done showed I had an infection. I knew I had an infection. I said in your Zoom meeting, Nadia, just prior to me coming home, my blood work isn't right. My blood glucose is shooting up into the 200s. And because I'm doing time-restricted eating, they're coming back down to 80. And it's blowing everybody away, including me. I never had an infection, and my blood glucose is normal.
So this was definitely a sign that something wasn't right. But before this, we skipped in this, we must celebrate our victories, as we often remind people in our community. We skipped a super important part. So when you had the surgery, I know this for a fact, I've been following your journey quite closely. So when you had your surgery, the day after the surgery, or just a few hours after the surgery, your blood sugars were amazing. I remember you telling us they were in the 80s or 80, and the doctors and nurses were blown away. Again, they were constantly getting blown away by you, but they were blown away at the fact that somebody who previously, you were still diagnosed as somebody with diabetes, post-surgery, usually people's numbers tend to go up. But you didn't expect your numbers to go up. You expected your numbers to be amazing, and they were amazing. So you weren't amazed by them, but the doctors and nurses were, because you had, I believe, an 80, and you were discharged, right, from the hospital with a clean bill of health, and were expected to have an amazing recovery. And then you started to notice, this is the red flags. Then you started to notice that you expected your blood sugars to stay in the 80s because you were doing TRE. You were doing time-restricted eating. You've been amazing. You've reversed diabetes. You've done amazing with TRE. And then your blood sugars start shooting up to 200. And even though they were coming back down to 80 every time, you knew something was wrong. You knew this was a sign definitely that something was wrong. So then you went to the hospital and they diagnosed you with.
Yeah, I went back to the surgeon for post-op, and that was the first time I saw my foot, and I just gasped. I never saw anything like that in my life.
And you've even given it a nickname. What have you called it?
I called that wound Scary Wound because it scared me. It took my breath away. I never saw a wound just spread open the way it did.
Right. And that was the cause of those super high blood sugars that you hadn't seen for months and didn't justify based on, what you'd been doing. So unfortunately, and, one of the most feared things unfortunately happened, which is you had this super scary infection and it wasn't an easy thing to deal with. And you went through weeks and weeks of having to deal with that. And so walk us through that a little bit. And then, of course, we're going to end on a high note as usual with Wende, but walk us through that. I know you had to go through a lot of medications and tell us a little bit about that. And then consequently, how your blood sugars reacted and what you've been doing since.
Okay. Yeah, I got a phone call. I sent pictures to Dr. McAllister thinking that he sent me to a wound doctor, and I thought he was sharing. He wasn't. So the first time that Dr. McAllister saw my wounds, I had a big, huge wound on the dorsal, that scary wound. Then I had a wound, a hole in my plantar. That shouldn't have been the way it was either. So I send him pictures. The next day the phone rings. I have a special ring on my phone for doctors, so I know it's a doctor. I pick up the phone. Wende, it's Dr. McAllister. Hi, how are you? Wende, I saw the pictures that you sent me. This is what you need to do. You need to get to the hospital. I want you to go to the emergency room. And I want you to tell them to admit you, that you're having surgery tomorrow, and to call me. Okay. I was shocked. Okay.
You had to have a second surgery, Wende.
This is the second surgery. March 7th was the phone call. March 8th was the second surgery. I thought that, yes, they were going to check to make sure that the infection didn't hit the bone, whether it was on Scary Wound or my plantar. Well, what happened was that day they did the surgery. Dr. McAllister did a bone biopsy, a bone marrow biopsy, and stayed in the operating room with me until they got the results. Thank God. The infection did not reach the bone. He then closed the plantar up. He stitched it up and woke me up, and I came out of surgery, and I was thrilled. I was like, oh, thank you. You are my hero. You're wonderful. And he says, you're the rock star. And I said, what? No, thank you. So that is a great start, but there's still something wrong. So Dr. McAllister goes back to the office. I now meet the head of the hospital, and I talked about her in the first podcast.
Yes, you did.
And she is another hero of mine. And she came into my room. I'm just going to repeat, Nadia, because this was special to me.
Please do. I'm a big fan of repetition, right? So go ahead, Wende.
Thank you. She came into my room and she said, so I understand you are controlling your blood glucose numbers and you have an infection, a post-op infection that we haven't identified yet. How in the world are you doing that? And I smiled and I said, my first answer was, diet, and exercise. And she looked at me and I said, intermittent fasting. And she turned around and she said, I've read the obesity code. And I was thrilled. I was like, oh my gosh. And we were immediate friends. I said, you need to read the diabetes code. You need to read PCOS. You need to read the guide to intermittent fat. I mean, I just went on and on and on. She said, Wende, I would like to be your primary care doctor while you're in the hospital with us. Great. So we had a great relationship.
Wow. And I mean, how amazing too that these two individuals cross paths, you and this amazing doctor, amazing Wende and amazing doctor. But I think that this is where I want to start celebrating again, because, you know, the fact that she came to see you in your room and the reason why she was so amazed is because, first of all, who is this person who brings down her A1C from 15 to 9 and then to 7? And then who is this person that walks out of a surgery with a blood sugar of 80? Because as we know, unfortunately, all diabetics know this, all pre-diabetics know this. Every single time that you have a stress of any sort, physical or emotional, anytime that you have a surgery, a lesion, a flu, your blood sugars go up, and they go up quite a bit. An infection, of course, as we've seen with Wende, you walk out of surgery with perfect blood sugars. So everybody's amazed at that for sure. Then, unfortunately, as can happen, and of course, this is one of the most feared side effects of post-surgery is a severe infection, and yours was quite severe. And your body told you, because you knew that even though your lifestyle now includes intermittent fasting and TRE, you should not be seeing blood sugars of 200. So a blood sugar of 200 clearly indicated an infection. In this case, a serious infection and another surgery. Yet you walk out of this another surgery, second surgery, with perfect blood sugars. And the doctors are amazed. What the heck is this woman doing that she has such amazing blood sugars? And so, serendipity, of course. So now it's been 3 months, Wende, since Scary Wound, since second surgery, since a lot of medication, I know, and antibiotics, and we're all dying to know what has happened. What has happened to you, Wende? What has happened to your foot and your leg? And it's all good news, so we're ready for it. Let's hear it.
I had a third surgery. This wonderful vascular doctor found a blockage in my left thigh. So we had to have a third surgery. I didn't leave that hospital for 11 days from March 7th when I was admitted. So he was able to remove the blockage, and immediately blood flow started. Warmth in my leg and my feet started. Beautiful color in my toes started. Scary Wound, I had home health coming to the house, and I need to do a shout out to my nurse, Pam, who took great care. Great. But amazing. Once that blood flow started, the wound started healing. You need blood flow. You need protein. I did time-restricted eating from January until just recently. And that proved to me that I can heal my body. I can be on maintenance when I reach my amazing goal. Scary Wound isn't scary anymore. It just has to form a scab. And I went and I have to wear what's called a charcoal boot for the rest of my life. And one friend said to me, boy, that's tough. I said, not at all. I said, I have my leg and my foot. I'll wear whatever I have to wear. I don't care. And I'll have to teach myself how to walk, but I'm up for the challenge. I'm walking. I had so many angels come into my life and help me. And TFM's one of them, the community. You all kept me in check. And you all followed me and gave me the support that I needed.
We were definitely, worried. But, as you've shown us, since we've had the pleasure to meet you, you can overcome just about anything, dear Wende. And you have been nothing but a source of great inspiration, motivation. And so I'm going to take this opportunity and ask you, Wende, today, what are some things, or one thing, what is your favorite thing? This is usually we end off or when we have an expert guest, and really that's what you are when it comes to this particular topic of neuropathy. And I mean, having experienced all of this yourself and having overcome all of that, leave us with a tip for today, Wende, for everyone listening in, people who maybe where you were a couple of years ago, maybe they're halfway through their recovery journey and needing a little bit of extra motivation and support. What can you share with somebody? What would be your favorite tip to leave with us, with our listeners today?
Never give up. Always remember your reason for doing what you're doing, your why. You just keep going no matter, I took one step forward and took 3 steps back. It's okay. Just keep on your journey because things are going to change. And I'm living proof for that to happen. Keep your why in check, your motivation. You can do this. Even if you have to talk to yourself out loud, I can do this. I can do this. Thank you, Nadia.
Thank you, dear Wende. You can be your own self-coach, a kind, loving self-coach. Thank you once again, Wende, and thank you to everyone listening today. And we will be back next week with another episode, this time with our wonderful Megan back from her trip. Thank you, everyone.